Hello, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Moore's October Rants. Today's episode is going to be titled, Sometimes It's Not Anyone's Fault When a Relationship Ends. Relationships are one of the most complex and nuanced aspects of human life, and yet as a society, we often oversimplify them. It's easy to jump to conclusions when we hear about a relationship ending. We assume that someone must have done something wrong, that one party must have lied, cheated, or otherwise failed in some way. But if we really stop to think about it, that's not always the case. Relationships are far more intricate than we often give them credit for, and the reasons they end are just as diverse as the people involved. Take, for instance, a common scenario where external factors play a larger role than the individuals themselves. I had a friend whose relationship ended not because of anything he or his girlfriend did, but due to cultural differences between their families. He lived in Asia and his girlfriend was from South America. Despite their deep connection and mutual respect, his parents disapproved of the relationship due to cultural reasons. The decision to part ways wasn't based on anything either of them did wrong. It was simply an unfortunate circumstance beyond their control. This is a perfect example of how sometimes the end of a relationship isn't about blame, but about external realities. When we hear about someone's relationship ending, our natural instinct is often to analyze the situation through a lens of fault. We wonder who messed up, who said or did the wrong thing, or who made a mistake. But that perspective is narrow minded. Relationships end for countless reasons, some within our control and others that aren't. Life is complicated, and so are relationships. It's not fair, or even accurate, to assume that every breakup must involve wrongdoing. Another reason relationships can end is simply incompatibility. Two people can love and respect each other deeply, but love doesn't always equal compatibility. You might share values but have different visions for your future. You might adore each other's quirks but struggle to communicate effectively. These aren't failures so much as acknowledgments of reality. Sometimes the healthiest, most respectful decision is to part ways, even when there's no animosity or drama involved. It's also worth considering that relationships can run their natural course. People grow, evolve, and sometimes outgrow one another. This doesn't negate the value of the relationship or the love shared, it just means that the chapter has closed. We rarely treat other endings in life with the same gravity we assign to relationships. When a sale ends, we don't mourn it as a failure. When a book concludes, we often celebrate the story it told. Why should relationships be any different? Unfortunately, societal attitudes often reinforce the notion that endings are inherently bad. There's a stigma attached to having an ex partner, as though the existence of a past relationship is proof of some character flaw. People are quick to make assumptions, often imagining the worst. But those assumptions say more about the person making them than about the reality of the relationship. It's essential to approach these situations with empathy and curiosity instead of judgment. When someone shares their experience of a relationship ending, instead of leaping to conclusions, why not ask thoughtful questions? Seek to understand the circumstances and the lessons they learned. This not only fosters deeper connections, but also challenges the harmful stereotypes we often perpetuate about relationships. As adults, many of us have experienced relationships that didn't work out. That's part of life. It's how we learn, grow, and refine what we want and need in a partner. A relationship ending doesn't necessarily mean it was a failure. Sometimes it's the healthiest and most compassionate choice. Ending things before they spiral into resentment or toxicity can be an act of love in itself. Even in cases where no one is at fault, the societal tendency to see endings as inherently negative can make it difficult for people to move on. We're conditioned to view breakups as disasters rather than as opportunities for growth or change. But every ending carries with it the possibility of a new beginning. It's all about perspective. Ultimately, the way we perceive endings, whether in relationships or other areas of life, reflects our mindset. We can choose to see them as failures, or we can choose to see them as transitions, as natural parts of life's ebb and flow. Not every ending is a tragedy. Sometimes it's a beautiful acknowledgement that two people shared something meaningful but are now ready to take separate paths. The key is to let go of the narrative that every relationship must have a villain or a victim. Instead, let's embrace the idea that relationships are as varied as the people who create them. Endings can be painful, but they can also be freeing, transformative, and even beautiful. When we stop viewing them as failures, we open ourselves to a deeper understanding of love, connection, and the human experience. Anyways, thank you for listening to this episode of the Moore's October Rants. Signing out. Have a good one, guys. Goodbye for now.